at BSides, Cincy. The stream will begin shortly. BSides Cincinnati 2016 is sponsored by GE Aviation, Ashland, CBTS, Encore Technologies, Morphic. Join the conversation. Tweet us at BSides Cincy. The stream will begin shortly. BSides Cincinnati 2016 is sponsored by GE Aviation, Ashland, CBTS, Encore Technologies, Morphic. Join the conversation. Tweet us at BSides Cincy. The stream will begin shortly. BSides Cincinnati 2016 is sponsored by GE Aviation, Ashland, CBTS, Encore Technologies, Morphic. Join the conversation. Tweet us at BSides Cincy. The stream will begin shortly. BSides Cincinnati 2016 is sponsored by GE Aviation, Ashland, CBTS, Encore Technologies, Morphic. Join the conversation. Tweet us at BSides Cincy. The stream will begin shortly. BSides Cincinnati 2016 is sponsored by GE Aviation, Ashland, CBTS, Encore Technologies, Morphic. Join the conversation. Tweet us at BSides Cincy. The stream will begin shortly. BSides Cincinnati 2016 is sponsored by GE Aviation, Ashland, CBTS, Encore Technologies, Morphic. Join the conversation. Tweet us at BSides Cincy. The stream will begin shortly. BSides Cincinnati 2016 is sponsored by GE Aviation, Ashland, CBTS, Encore Technologies, Morphic. Join the conversation. Tweet us at BSides Cincy. The stream will begin shortly. BSides Cincinnati 2016 is sponsored by GE Aviation, Ashland. CBTS. Encore Technologies. Morphic. Join the conversation. Tweet us at BSides Cincy. The stream will begin shortly. BSides Cincinnati 2016 is sponsored by GE Aviation, Ashland, CBTS, Encore Technologies, Morphic. Join the conversation. Tweet us at BSides Cincy. The stream will begin shortly. BSides Cincinnati 2016 is sponsored by GE Aviation, Ashland, CBTS, Encore Technologies, Morphic. Join the conversation. Tweet us at BSides Cincy. The stream will begin shortly. BSides Cincinnati 2016 is sponsored by GE Aviation, Ashland, CBTS, Encore Technologies, Morphic. Join the conversation. Tweet us at BSides Cincy. The stream will begin shortly. BSides Cincinnati 2016 is sponsored by GE Aviation, Ashland, CBTS, Encore Technologies, Morphic. Join the conversation. Tweet us at BSides Cincy. The stream will begin shortly. BSides Cincinnati 2016 is sponsored by GE Aviation, Ashland, CBTS, Encore Technologies, Morphic. Join the conversation. Tweet us at BSides Cincy. The stream will begin shortly. BSides Cincinnati 2016 is sponsored by GE Aviation, Ashland, CBTS, Encore Technologies, Morphic. Join the conversation. Tweet us at BSides Cincy. The stream will begin shortly. BSides Cincinnati 2016 is sponsored by GE Aviation, Ashland, CBTS, Encore Technologies, Morphic. Join the conversation. Tweet us at BSides Cincy. The stream will begin shortly. BSides Cincinnati 2016 is sponsored by GE Aviation, Ashland, CBTF.
Probably have to project. Great. I think it feels fine in here. I'm always cold.
Good.
Good? All right.
Ready now?
We'll do it.
All right.
Do it up.
Hey, everybody.
Hi, Justin.
Our next speaker is this fine gentleman. He's the threat intel leader at Ashland. His name is Nate Hausrath.
All right. Thank you. All right. So first of all, my name's Nate. I like GIFs. I particularly like them during presentations because they distract the hell out of you. Look at this lovely thing. All right. So anyway, so about a year ago, I got the opportunity to come to Ashland from GE Aviation. And at Ashland, I got to build a threat intelligence program from scratch. Now, the people that were already there had done a good job of documenting and things like that, so my job was made a little bit easier, but it was a pretty unique opportunity, especially a good chance to really learn how to do it myself. And it's been awesome, and so I kind of want to talk about some of the lessons learned and sort of the things that, all the little things you need to put together to do threat intelligence and do it correctly, because there are a lot of wrong ways to do it, it turns out. So let's start with something easy, goals. All right, so obviously before you do just about everything, you want to set your goals. So what are the goals of building a threat intelligence program? Why the heck would you do it, right? So first and foremost, it's really just about understanding the threats that your company faces. That's really it, from top to bottom, understanding those threats. But what that actually gives you is that you can take that and you can actually learn more about the risk of your company. Like what's the actual risk of these threats, the things that you are actually seeing. And that's really ultimately the goal of building a threat intelligence program. There's a lot that goes into it, but it pretty much boils down to that. So pretty simple, but again, how the heck do we do it, right? So I laid out a few simple things here, and this is really at a high level, this is how you do it, okay? So it all starts with communication. You have to be able to communicate both internally to the teams within your company, but also externally to other partners and other companies, and be able to talk about the things that you're seeing. So communication, 100% very important, right? But along with communication, once you start talking about the things that you might be interested in, then we want to really dig in and learn more about our enemies, the actors out there, the groups out there that are going to target our company or target us individually. So we want to learn more about them, and then from there we're going to collect a lot of information about these guys, try to figure out what they're doing, who they are, what they're after, and then we need to build things to help us automate it. Build things out to help us parse all this data, analyze it, and do things with it so we can draw conclusions. And then we start over, all right? And then we just keep doing it, right? So I guess we can recurse. That would be the fancy way to do it, or we can just loop while true, do this. So going a little further, we should really focus on who our customers are. And I mean that primarily internally. So who are our customers within our company that are going to use the intelligence that we generate, that are going to take all of the data, all the conclusions that we draw, they're going to take it and use it in some way that makes their jobs easier, right? So we start with detect, our detect team. Look at these false positives. So your detect team is primarily your primary customer. They will get the most direct benefit from the things that you do. They take the things, the indicators, maybe the tactics and things like that. They take those and they apply them to the tools that are looking at things on your network, right? So they're really your first and foremost customer. But at the same time, you're pretty much nothing without your detection team, because the things that they detect, the things that they find, those are the things that you dig into and learn about. So it's really kind of a looping relationship, I guess. So they find things, You dig into them and analyze them, learn about them, and then you give them your results, and then they go find more things, right? Incident response. It was really between this one and the, I'm not even going to try to do it, the other Batman gif where that one? You guys seen that one? Okay, good, thank you. God, all right, I can't believe I just did that. But no, seriously though, your incident responders, so when you actually have an incident, when you actually have something that happens on your network, they're the guys that go and put out the fires, right? Or gals, sorry, misspoke. So they go and put out the fires, and they're going to take the data that you know, the things you know about, all the tools, tactics, procedures, things like that that you've learned about your enemies. They're going to take that and apply it to what they're doing. So say you have a threat group out there that is, they've compromised the system, they've maybe moved laterally. It's a bad incident right there. They're moving laterally, they're going after certain things, and you've actually seen them before, right? Because you've done the analysis. Well, you can then communicate with your incident responders and tell them what they might expect this actor to do. What would this actor go after? Are there certain systems they tend to target? Are there certain tools and things like that they like to drop on the boxes? How do they even move laterally? How do they typically get into the network? All these things are questions that are going to be asked during an incident, and your job is to be able to provide that information so that everyone can go and clean it up, and then you can go back in, and again, you'll dig into that data later and probably learn new things. So how have they evolved? But incident response, definitely a big deal. Architecture, so this is pretty all-encompassing. Your architecture group, or an individual maybe, this is a person or a group that's responsible for communicating with the rest of your IT staff about security issues. They provide recommendations from your team to the rest of the company about how you should do things. We're very lucky that we have an individual who's really good at this, and they come to the intelligence team, though, quite often to ask questions about things that they're seeing. So what kind of, maybe as an example, what kind of vulnerabilities are out there? Maybe there's a recent vulnerability. It sounds particularly bad, but is it something that's actually being exploited? Are certain groups using this? Are these, if groups are using this, are they a group that actually targets your company? Have you seen them in the past? All these things kind of weigh into the decisions that you're going to make. And so the intelligence really helps drive those decisions. Leadership. Leadership is also a very important customer. They're going to take your information and probably talk up. They might talk to other companies, build your reputation, but really it's all about taking data so that they can build the reputation of your team when they communicate maybe up to even like the executive level, further, like higher up under the CEO and that sort of thing. Because, as we all know, as security professionals, oftentimes once you start to stop threats and things from happening, bad things from happening, they start to question, well, why are we paying for all this stuff? I mean, we're not seeing any incidents, right? So if you take the things that you see, all the information about maybe the specific groups and what they're after, and then historical data, all the justification for why your team exists, and you're able to provide that to your leadership, they're able to do their job better in justifying all the money that the company's spending on your security team. All right, so let's move on to some priorities. So we have to really prioritize, because there is so much data out there to collect, so many things to do and analyze. Even if you have a big team for intelligence, it's still hard to keep track of everything and actually, work on everything that you could possibly work on, right? So we really need to set out some priorities of what we're going to try to do. So first thing I would start with is what are the known targets, the known things that are targeting your company or your company's sector. So if you're for instance a retail company, what are the biggest threats that are targeting retail companies? If you have a good detect team, what are the things that you've seen? They don't have to be incidents. They maybe you stop them at at a phishing phase, delivery phase, something like that. They didn't actually get on your network. That's cool too. But who is targeting and what are they trying to do? So we want to prioritize the things that are specifically focused on our company. Next thing is we can branch out and talk to other companies and figure out what other companies are struggling with. Obviously these days, one of the major broad-based things is ransomware. It's really easy to talk about because everyone struggles with it, right? So finding out about that, that's an easy one, but there may be other specific things that could impact you as well. And you would want to know those, learn about them, and then provide that to your rest of your teams. And then, what have you actually seen? I guess that goes along with the first one. The last one I throw out here is strategic and political things. So if you think about political situations, especially if you're, we have a lot of global companies in the room, you may have employees that are stationed in companies or divisions of your business that are stationed in part of the world or parts of the world where certain political events may influence activity you might see. I mean, you could look at situations like the Russia-Ukraine situation recently. If you take a look at Black Energy, that Trojan, and how it brought down some power plants and things like that, or power grids, I should say, not the power plants. But I think we could all find that there's a very likely tie back to Russia itself for that, just based off the political situation there at the time. So those are some things that can color what you want to look at. So let's move on to sources of intelligence. Where the heck do you get all this stuff? Yes. So the number one source of intelligence, in my opinion, are sharing groups. Now, I say that with a caveat because there are a ton of different sharing groups out there. A lot of them are in various, varying stages of maturity. If you happen to be lucky enough to be a member of a mature sharing group that shares really good indicators and really good information about certain threat groups, well, you're in luck because you're going to get a lot of great information specifically about campaigns and groups of bad guys and the missions that they're after, but also all the way down to like specific malware and how it works. Recent events and activity. These groups, they can share really, really wonderful amounts of information. But there are, of course, a lot of sharing groups that have yet to get there, and that's okay too, though. These groups are still trying to build trust, and a lot of what makes a sharing group successful is that trust. And so, as sharing groups kind of live for a while, you begin to build trust with each other, with the other companies and things like that are in these groups. So I mentioned all of these. These are all like industry-specific groups. There are a ton more. There are other less formal sharing groups out there that you can find that are also very useful. And then going along with that, how are you actually going to share this information? So these are just some examples. There are lots of ways to do it, but I threw out Facebook Threat Connect or Threat Exchange, excuse me, because it's relatively new. It's in beta. You have to you could register for it, but you may not get accepted immediately. But it has a lot of promise, and I like it a lot because it really controls who you share with. They say that they're not going to look at any of the data you share if you share it privately, and that's great. I probably trust them, but I heard that. They actually are also building in public-private key encryption to the data you're sharing, so you can actually encrypt it if you're really really paranoid about it, or if it's really sensitive. You can do that, or you will be able to do that. I'm not sure if that's done yet. But it's all API based, which I really like. So you can really write your automation about pulling data and pushing data if you really want to. And you can really granularly, finely tune who you share things with. So it could be, it's like sharing with your friends list, things that you build on your own Facebook, if you use Facebook, right? So you can share with your friends, or you can create little groups, that sort of stuff, or you can share with an individual. But yeah, I think it's great. It's got a ton of different indicator types and different, I guess, just intel types that you can share. So way, way more than most things. Then there's Threat Connect. It is a vendor, but I actually kind of like some of the stuff they're doing, although they don't have a ton of indicator types that you can share. But they do allow you to create individual communities and things like that, where you can share data within communities and kind of rank that data and whatnot. But so I like some of their approaches. And then it really doesn't have to be high tech either. Especially if you're getting started, you can share things via forums, via email, whatever you want. Just post out the information you've got of maybe an incident or things like that, and leave it up to the other person to figure out how they get it into their tools. All right, next up. So another great source of information. Gosh, you guys are going to love staring at this while I talk about it. All right. Open source intelligence. So this could be things like vendor blogs, vendor reports, but it could also be just malware write-ups on some random dude's blog. It could be anything you search on Google. So basically anywhere out there on the internet that you can get information about things you're seeing, and then take that and apply it to your own company, your own systems. Great. That's what we mean by OSN. So I think it's a great source. It's a broad source, but you have to really take a look at some of it pretty closely. We'll talk a little bit about attribution later and other little fine details that get a little mixed up, but it is still a good source for things to look at and maybe things that are happening in the world, right? Feeds, yeah. So indicator feeds, right? Indicator feeds are they're big old lists of stuff to look for, right? Or at least that's typically what they're billed as. I think they are both good and bad. It really depends on how you apply them, because we run into issues about just we run into issues about just random things. Just like lots of random indicators that get in there that don't have a lot of meaning. You'll get IP and domain lists that are bad IPs, bad domains, things like that. And if you just go look for those, I mean, they're going to light up your false positives. Who's your number one customer? Your detect team, right? They're going to come and lynch you because you've sent so many IP addresses that are just bad, and they're getting alerts on these bad IP addresses, and then they dig into them and they're like, I don't know, that was Skype or that was Tor. Like, why is that bad? I don't know. I don't know why that's bad. So I saw this is kind of an interesting quote that I took out of the latest Verizon DBIR. And really they were talking about analyzing all the numbers of indicator feeds that are out there. And they were comparing the indicators in each individual feed to all the other feeds that were out there. And what they found is that for basically each individual feed, like 97% of the indicators in that feed were completely unique to that feed. And what that tells me is that there's just so many indicators out there, and they're changing so quickly. So if you've got IP address, I mean, a lot of these indicators are IP addresses, domains, emails, like sender addresses, things like that. These are things that bad guys can change on, the drop of a hat. And they change all the time. They change automatically. So as you're getting these feeds, they're already out of date, and the bad guys have already changed to something else. So you really have to, kind of take that into context when you're talking about them. So what do we really want though out of this? Well, all these feeds actually can provide context to the things that you're seeing. So take for instance you get an alert, and we have an IP address feed of all known Tor exit nodes, for instance, right? So you get an alert. It may be on some network activity. Your system automatically presents an alert to your analyst, but it goes and it pulls information about these IP addresses. And the IP address, it actually will look and say, look against maybe a Tor feed and see is this a Tor exit node? And if so, maybe it provides context to the analyst. It says, okay, this thing is a Tor exit node, but it doesn't alert itself. It just kind of enhances the data. So I think that if you're able to find feeds though that can automatically provide additional context as well, then you found something that's a lot more useful. And so there are some useful things out there. I have to mention Critical Stack because they aggregate a lot of great feeds together. You can really pick and choose the ones that you want. So if you're interested in known Dridex botnet C2s or something and Tor exit nodes, you can pull those down and use them how you will. I mean, it's really easy and convenient. Alien Vault, they provide this open thread exchange where you can kind of create groups of feeds, and then you rank them. You say like, did I see this? Yes, was it malicious? That kind of stuff. So adding a little extra context, that's good, right? And then ThreatCrowd I really like. It's a tool that you can just drop like an IP or a domain into ThreatCrowd, and it'll go out and see if there's any relationships that it knows about. So maybe it's malware samples, or maybe it's if you drop an IP in, is it related to other domains? And what are like the close relationships to that? So it can help help build out additional information about the things you're seeing. It also has an API. So moving on to internal analysis. So this is really taking a look at all the things internal to your company that, the things you're seeing and analyzing them. So we're really talking about event analysis here. And this can be anywhere in the kill chain. Who's familiar with the kill chain? I guess it's all right, fair number of you. But it's a useful way of describing an attack and how far attackers get along that. So when we're doing internal analysis, we're getting data from. It could be reconnaissance. We could if the bad guys are hitting our external firewalls. Maybe we want to dig a little deeper into those and see if it's anything useful. Is it anything we know about? Obviously, like phishing attacks are pretty big. We want to pull those apart as much as we can, and not just talk about, not just say like, oh, what's the actual phishing email look like, but what are the attachments involved with it? What do they do? That sort of thing. And then if you happen to have an incident where things go south and they actually are doing stuff on your network, then we want to analyze that as fully as we can to get all the little things out of that are useful, so that we can do analysis on them, we can communicate about them, and then we can look for them later and that sort of thing. Obviously we want to look at specific malware if we have any. We want to pull those apart as much as we can and learn about the malware itself. What's it doing? That'll help tell us like really what its goals were. Help us kind of color that the whole event. Figure out what they were after. And then of course like targeting and how like maybe if it was like a phish, how it was themed. So who is it targeting? Are they salespeople somewhere? Are they like research scientists? Is it executives? All of that helps really color what the event is and what you can learn from that event. And all of that is definitely part of intelligence. So I threw this on here real quick, but you definitely want to do some sort of external research while you're doing event analysis. So that could be going to VirusTotal to look for whether something exists out there already. If you want to upload it yourself, if you're comfortable doing that, that's fine too. Could be going to a sandbox like malware here. Maybe they already have the sample there, someone's already uploaded it, or maybe you want to upload it yourself if you don't have an internal sandbox for yourself to see just how the malware or how the document performs. Through domain tools up here too, just for to kind of show how you may end up doing additional things like. So again, going back to IPs and domains, or like a domain register. So we have a domain, we know it's bad, it was involved in part of this event, right? Well, we can go look and say like, who registered that domain? Did they use privacy? If not, well, what was the name? What was the address? What was the email address, phone number, etc. that it was registered under? And then we can go and take those and pivot and see if there are any new domains that were registered by those same little things, right? And that could help us stay on top of maybe a future attack. So we've collected all this intelligence. Where do we put it, right? So if we're analyzing events, we're collecting things from open source places, we're talking with partners, et cetera, et cetera. Where do we put it, right? Well, I'm not shy about the fact that I love CRITS. CRITS was developed by MITRE. It stands for Collaborative Research into Threats. But it's basically a broad, not only just an indicator database, but it also allows you to store all kinds of other threat intelligence sort of things like malware samples and emails and domains and IPs, and even things like assigning campaigns to certain things. You can obviously tag things, and basically allows you to take all these things and relate them with each other. And what that allows you to do then is you can then kind of walk those relationships and see if you can learn anything new. You can do analysis on the relationships themselves. So really useful tool. I mean, you can start as simply as you want. You could just dump indicators in there for now, and then as you learn more and get more comfortable doing intelligence, and you get some more analysis done, then you can start using maybe some of the other features. But it could also be as simple as just dropping things in a wiki, or a shared Excel document that you have among your team. I mean, if you're just getting started, really the most important thing is just to start storing things, right? You want to store it so you can refer to it later. so that you can do analysis on it later if you discover maybe things in the future you think might tie back to it. And so yeah, just documenting it is a great first step. So we have a wiki. We use it to add like narrative to a lot of things. We had a wiki at GE. It's useful even if it doesn't store the raw atomic data points and allow you to do other things, but it's good to have that narrative. Git is another thing. You could store things like Yara signatures in Git and then have them, then you have your revision control, but you also can then easily pull them down to other tools you have out there. And I know there are other things out there that you can probably use. These are really just the things I use. I did throw Maltego on here just because it's a great analysis tool for intelligence. You can actually export all your stuff from crits into Maltego and do your transforms on them and things like that. So, all right, let's go into one of the really fun things and sort of a goal of intelligence as well, and that's attribution. So when we're talking about attribution, we talk about basically two separate things. We're talking about either malware family attribution, so what is the malware that we're seeing, or campaign attribution. So I'll get into both of them here. So starting with malware family attribution. So by doing attribution, we're able to communicate pretty effectively and easily what we're seeing, right? So if I say something is Dridex, probably a lot of you have immediate context of what that is. And that's part of why we do this, is so that when we talk about it, we actually know what it is and we can actually categorize it. So now it would be great though if malware authors would just send us their samples and you can just like run a quick YAR rule on it, hits on some things, and awesome, we know exactly what it is, right? Unfortunately, that's pretty much never the case. So malware is obfuscated, it's packed, it's encrypted, and then you have like vendors that get in the mix here. So I took a sample. It's called Keybase. It's just a simple keylogger, and I looked it up on VirusTotal, right? Well, I mean, look at all this stuff, right? We've got these vendors are calling it crypt, inject. I mean, you look down a little further. We're getting closer here. This one I've never heard of calls it Dark Comet. That's not quite right, but to be fair to this, I mean these are AV signatures, right? They're not necessarily meant to do attribution all the time, and also this sample it's packed, so it's kind of hard. The crypt thing probably applies, right? So they detect it. That's great. So I unpacked it and then tried, and I didn't upload it, but it wasn't on there. Great. Well, pivoting a little further, I went out to Trend Micro to see what they called it. They called it Kybex, and honestly, I've looked at quite a few of these. I don't see Kybex anywhere in Keybase. Like I don't know, maybe I've just got the wrong samples, but I don't know where they got this name, but that's what they call it. And then you see like Symantec calls it Chabibase. I don't even know how to pronounce that. Then there's Avast calls it a keylogger, so they're that's pretty close. And then Skia, I don't know what that is. I mean, this is a family of malware that has a freaking website, right? It's called Keybase. The author sells it to you on keybase.in. So I really only bring that up just to say that malware, like attributing a malware family to certain malware samples, can be really hard. It's useful, but it can be really hard, especially when you get into things that don't have a freaking website, right? So, I mean, there are plenty of things out there, plenty of tools that bad guys love to use. They're not publicly available. Maybe they're very narrowly targeted. What do you call those? I mean, you tend to find common ground within your team, and then hopefully you can figure out when you're talking about it when you're sharing with other groups. But it gets pretty hard. So, moving on to campaign attribution. so tracking campaigns. A campaign is really it's really something that is like a full attack. The group behind it, their mission, what are they doing, who are they targeting, what are they after. So when we're talking about a campaign, we're talking about a pretty broad set of things. But But it's useful to know, so we can really, when we're talking about a campaign, it brings a specific group to light, and all the tools, tactics, procedures, that kind of stuff, techniques, whatever you want to call it, all the TTPs that this group uses. So yeah, when we communicate about it, it'll instantly bring something to mind if if your team knows about it and if you have it documented well. That's really our goal with that. So campaign attribution, especially when you're starting a program, it's a little difficult to really start out. But with a little persistence, you start to really get a clearer picture. So you start out by just grouping like activity together. So we're doing analysis on events that our company sees. And remember, we really do want to focus on the things our company sees, because those are the things that are the biggest threat to us. So we start doing analysis on those, and we start grouping like activity together. Maybe that is like a particular phishing theme that you see. Maybe it's a particular set of malware that you see. There's some that are easy. Like we could probably lump all Dridex stuff together for a little bit, right? We've lumped like things like all these keyloggers together, like Keybase or Hawkeye. But over time, you start lumping them together. You're gathering this data. You're putting it in crits or whatever you put it in, and then over time, as you see them more, or as you gather more information, you start to notice that the picture becomes a little more clear. And this honestly can happen kind of organically. But so over time, as you're getting more data, you learn more things, and then you can start to break little things apart, and you can realize you may realize that, oh, this delivery theme is shared amongst a bunch of different groups. So okay, maybe delivery is not a great indication of this type of campaign, but if we dig into the malware behind it, maybe we might learn that the bad guys might make some OPSEC mistakes, and they've left some web infrastructure open, and you can say like, aha, got you. I found some specific things for this group. I know who they are, and then when you start to see future events, it gets a lot easier to kind of understand how it all fits together. The one really important thing, though, when talking about campaign attribution, really attribution in general, is that you really don't want to be afraid to express confidence and or doubts about the data that you're talking about. Intelligence isn't always an exact science. You are dealing with imperfect data, so we really want to express confidence when we're talking about something. So if maybe we have an event, we only see it at the delivery stage. They've done a pretty good job at the OPSEC. Maybe they used a delivery service of some type, and it's really hard to tell like what is beyond that. Well, you could say like, okay, this fits a couple little things, but it's really low confidence that it matches this known group that we have internally. So that's okay, or it may match up perfectly, and you can be really confident that it's the group. But don't be afraid to express that. All right. So one other issue, vendors again. So vendors have kind of an incentive to make everything sound new and cool, like they discovered something really amazing for the first time ever, because it makes them look good. It draws publicity their way. Is anyone familiar with all these? Anyone tell me something about them, maybe? Maybe that they're all the same group? They're all the same campaign? So I'm pretty sure they are. So they're all, if you actually look at a lot of the data with these, you find out they're pretty closely linked. So vendors, like I say, they really like to make things look new and interesting, but really they may all end up being the same thing. So you got to be aware of that as well when you're doing attribution. So moving on, we got data. We know what we want to do with it. The next best thing you can do, especially if you have a small team, is you automate everything. Automate as much as you can. Automation is wonderful. The computer does the bulk of the boring work for you, and you're left to go do some maybe cooler analysis or actually grab some more things and feed it into your systems. So it's very important. There are lots of steps to this, though. So this is where we're going to get into some specific tools. The first thing you need to automate is indicator collection, or just collection of data in general. This isn't by any means the only way you can do it. I started with a tool called IOC Parser. I forked it on GitHub, and then started to build my own to fit crits more than anything, and to do a few little different things. But IOC parser, you can feed it a thing like a PDF or a text document or whatever, and it'll scrape out indicators based off regexes, right? And you can then take those indicators, you can throw them into crits, and there you go, you got them in, right? Cool, you collected the data. You can also roll your own, I'm sure there are others. So the one thing about this is it's really easy to, because it's regex based, it's really easy to scrape email addresses, IP addresses, domain names, things like that. All these things listed here. It does a pretty good job scraping those. Now I can't obviously know when you're talking about, something like a Google IP address versus, an actual bad actor IP address, but, hopefully you can filter that out later. But there are certain things it struggles with that are still pretty nice to collect. So things like file names with spaces, right? I mean, it can't tell you that there's a space there. It doesn't know that that is actually part of the same exe. Mutexes, they're really just strings, right? Strings themselves, Windows services, et cetera, et cetera. So there are things that it struggles with because it's regex based. But one of the things we want to do is we want to find creative ways to continue to automate this. So if we want to collect this information, how are we actually going to do it? These are screenshots of Cuckoo and some malware that ran in Cuckoo. There are plenty of other sandboxes, but a sandbox actually can oftentimes provide this type of data in a way that you can actually get programmatically. So Cuckoo will give me a JSON file that says, here's all the data that I learned about this malware sample when it ran in my sandbox, right? We can take the modified sections of that JSON file, or the modified files, sorry, and then we can actually take those and just directly parse those themselves directly out of the JSON. So if there's spaces in there, it doesn't matter because it's actually in the data as the object we need. Same with things like mutexes. So I guess one of the things I want to point out about that is, if you keep automation in mind and the fact that you want to programmatically find ways to do a lot of the work for you, then you can continually find ways to make your life easier, and you just always have to constantly drive towards that when you're collecting data, when you're analyzing data, things like that. So just always move towards that. And then there are things that are useful for purely intelligence sake, and things that are also have overlap with detect. So your detect team isn't going to care about whois addresses. They aren't going to care about the name of the person that registered the domain, the phone number. That's not going to really help them detect. But on the intelligence team, one of the things you can do is you can take that data and you can pivot and find new things that can be detected, right? So there are things out there that only the intelligence team is going to care about, and that's okay though. I mean, those are other points of data that you're going to look at that may not help you for detect. Other things like actor names, that's not going to help you detect anything really. Actually, it might. Maybe you've got some LinkedIn profiles, some invites from actors that are posing on LinkedIn as someone like a recruiter or something. I don't know, and they're sending invites to your scientists or whatever. You can maybe detect on that sort of thing based off name, or maybe more likely the picture, the actual JPEG itself. So continuing on with our automation and with our tools to help make our lives easier. So frequency analysis is something that started at GE, and we've implemented our own solution that does essentially the same thing. But we've got all these indicators that are going into crits, and we would love to be able to use them for detection, right? We want to feed them automatically out to all the tools in our environment, so we're looking for them. But what if bad data gets into crits? What if Google.com gets into crits? I mean, it might actually be related to an attack, and it might get it, we're focused on automation, it might actually automatically get dumped into crits. How do we make sure that that doesn't get turned on in the environment? So with frequency analysis, you basically take new indicators into crits, and before you turn them on for detection, you run them against all your historical data, or a good subset of your historical data, whether that lives in Splunk, some sort of search thing like Splunk that categorizes and collects all the data from all your tools and visibility everywhere, or it could be something like a benign repository of files that you've built. We collect all the files that we see in Carbon Black. We collect those and store them in one location so that we can scan those and do things with them. So great. we build these rules, we run them against different subsets of data, and then if it hits on anything, if an individual indicator hits on anything, then we mark it for review. If it doesn't hit on anything, awesome, we just turn it on. So when we go to review though, say it hits on something, oftentimes it's really easy to tell whether an indicator is bad or not, right? Google.com, you'll instantly say, oh, that's terrible, turn it off. Sometimes maybe you put data in from an event itself that you saw in your environment and you analyzed. Those you can probably just turn right on to unless they look like they were really noisy. But the ones that are most interesting are the ones that hit on something and they don't hit a lot, but you actually need to review it and take a look and see whether it was something bad that you actually detected with historical data, right? But if you review it, and even if it is legitimate, it like finds some legitimate badness, but it also finds some stuff that's not bad at all. Like it's got false positives and true positives. We'll just turn it off because honestly, indicators are a dime a dozen. But if it does hit on something bad and something bad only, then we might actually have another incident and we need to go dive into it, right? So it's also, frequency analysis, I guess, is also a detection tool too. And then we get to analyzing malware. So when we're looking at all these events, right? We've got all kinds of things. If they're phishing, cool. We can look at the headers and the body and that sort of thing. But what will really tell us the story about the things that we're seeing is digging all the way down into the malware to figure out what it's doing. By figuring out what it's doing, you can figure out the pieces of data on the systems that it's targeting. You can figure out whether maybe it has lateral movement capabilities, things like that. What is it actually doing will provide you a lot of good information. So we need to build some way to automatically analyze malware that we see, especially if you see a very large quantity of it. Gee. So a malware zoo is a place that first and foremost stores your malware, and it also organizes it for you so that you can hopefully query it and get good information out of it. But it also does automated analysis on all of that malware. So as soon as I add a sample to the malware zoo, it takes it and does all the manual things. Well, not all. I haven't built it that far, right? So it's always a work in progress, but it does as much as possible automatically the things that I would do when I was looking at a sample, right? It also throws it into various sandboxes. Having one sandbox is great. Having like 10 is even better because sandboxes often fail on malware, or malware would detect a certain type of sandbox but not another type. Basically as many as you can get. But by throwing it into the malware zoo, it starts all this analysis for you, brings it all back for you, and then you can then take a look at that data and start your analysis from there. So you can also query that data if you've built it in a way that allows you to store it in a queryable form, that sort of thing. So malware zoo helps a lot in terms of automation. Oh boy! So before I move on to some fancy pictures, anyone have any quick questions or long questions? All right, awesome. So fun part are some results, right? So we've got this intelligence program. Intelligence program is a thing that encompasses a lot of stuff, right? You're looking at a lot of data, you're collecting a lot of data, you're doing analysis on it. What are the results? So this is a screenshot of Crits. It is a visualization plugin that actually takes a look at individual data points and then their relationships between those data points. So this is the green dots, those are events. They could be external, they could be internal, whatever. And then you've got other things like IPs, indicators, domains, emails, samples. All of those things are related in this picture, right? But this is a picture of a specific group that we track and how the data is related. And you can kind of see how it clusters a little bit. It also just looks kind of cool, so that counts, right? If you go in a little closer, you can see a lot more details about that data. So this is a particular node of a FireEye report on a piece of point-of-sale malware called Nitlove. It's cool there are all the indicators from that report, but then there's this little kind of offshoot for an IP address that is connected to some other stuff. And so that might be connected to something that you've seen internally. It might be connected to another report. But by visualizing data like this and taking a look at the relationships, we might find connections and maybe attribute this to a campaign that we track that we didn't know about otherwise. But that's why you build these relationships. This is a nifty little picture. It's kind of hard to see, actually, isn't it? Oh man, that sucks. It looks like a star field. It looks like a galaxy almost. But it's basically a picture of the relationships between all of our data and crits from a really macro perspective. So it's a cool picture. If you want to see it up close, it looks better on my screen. I think it looks awesome. But if we dig into this one, that is hard to see too. But this is a cluster of Brazilian activity that we've seen. And there are obviously a ton of relationships between this activity. So to me, it shows the same, basically it's very similar group or the same group, and this is all the activity that we've seen or collected from them. So this is kind of a shout out to why you might want to dig deeper, really deep into collecting or really doing close analysis of the malware you find, right? So take Dridex, for example, a little banking Trojan we've all heard about, right? Little piece of malware. It has differing botnets. There's 122 mentioned here. There's also like 220, and then there's some others. I can never keep track of them all. But honestly, when we tend to see Dridex, I'm like, oh, banking, I don't care. But I found this on Twitter. Actually, John Davison found this on Twitter, and we thought it was really interesting because what he found by taking a look at one of the Dridex 122 samples was that there's a lot of corporate software that's involved in that. And they even have in-house apps that the malware is looking for. And to me, that says that this actual botnet of Dridex might actually end up being a little bit more targeted than I would have previously thought, right? Now, again, expressed in confidence, this is based off some dude on Twitter. That's cool. I want to go dig into that myself, and maybe I can become a little more confident that that's what it's doing. This person also found that all of the Dridex botnets were signed by the same private key, which is pretty interesting to me because it talks a lot. That shows to me some of the structure of these criminal organizations that they're. We can actually get a little insight into their structure. So from what we know about criminal groups, cyber criminal groups, we know they run a lot like a business. So their bottom line is their main goal. They want to make money. They structure themselves like a business. They have different organizational and operational units. They recruit. They do things like that. So they run a lot like a business. And so by taking a look at something like this, to me that says that perhaps Dridex, we all think they're part of the same group, but this is pretty good evidence of that, I think, because it shows to me that there's one company, cyber criminal company, and then they have different divisions that run different botnets of Dridex that have different missions, basically. At least I can infer that. Again, I don't know, medium confidence of that, but I thought that was pretty interesting. So bringing it all back together, it's really all about communicating and then learning as much as you can about your enemies. You want to dig as far into all the data you have, and then you want to build things out to help you automate that and just keep doing it. And you'll learn a lot more about your overall threat picture, your overall risk for your company, and it'll help drive a lot of the decisions that you make. And that's really the focus of what an intelligence program is going to do. Threw out a couple of quick tools here. IOC parser. We're trying to open source tools. I will make no guarantees that will happen, but things like get it into crits, that's something I wrote that helps get data into crits and get it related in a really logical way that's actually useful. Because that's one of the hardest things. It takes forever to get data into crits properly. Crits itself, FAQ, Virus Total Hunter if you want to do any virus total research. Billion other tools. I don't know actually why I made this slide because it's just a list of a few little things out of the million you can use. And yeah, that's really all I got. So thanks. If you have any questions, I'm open to questions. Otherwise, I'm gonna go get a beer here in a little bit, and I'd love to talk to you. Yeah.
So it's something about confidence can be really hard.
Mhm.
It's really easy to just, I had a bad burger for lunch, I don't feel very confident in this. How do you codify setting confidence levels, and do you do any kind of analysis on your level after that?
Yeah, that's a great question actually. Question is really how do you codify confidence? How do you actually add more structure around confidence of indicators? Since it, as you say, can be really about like the burger you ate for lunch, or the black bean burger in my case. So yeah, that is a really good question. I mean, so when I put data into crits, I mark everything with a confidence that I think it is. That can certainly be changed later, although I'll admit that I don't get to that very often because there's obviously just so much data. But yeah, I think it really does kind of come down to gut feel and what you're seeing on the screen and how it's connected. But I think you can add confidence based off relationships that you build. It takes some effort to get to that point because really the first thing you're going to do is just try to get the data in, get those indicators in. That's really the first thing you're going to do. And then as you mature a little bit more in your program, maybe you get some help, some more resources that can do some work. Then you can start to build those relationships and figure out, kind of walk the relationships, and that can help build maybe your overall confidence rather than maybe specific indicator confidence and that sort of thing. What's up, Coleman? Yeah, I'm not going to repeat all that. Yeah.
So I thought there was an interesting idea to determine risk in your environment, determining whether or not you've seen something before.
Mm-hmm.
Would a balloon filter be a good candidate in that particular situation? Determine whether or
Man,
not you've seen this in your environment?
yeah, I'm gonna be embarrassed and admit that I don't really remember what that is specifically.
A balloon filter is a statistical way to determine whether or not you've seen a piece of data or not.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So he's talking about Bloom filters, and I mean, if it, as you say, if it's a statistical way to find whether you've seen things before, I think that's definitely something I would want to check out. I would have to learn it again, or for the first time maybe. Yeah. Yeah, man. Yeah. No, that's great. No, that's a great question. Yeah, so the question is, what are maybe the biggest error or bias in attribution? So I think number one is just getting out of your own way, like your own personal excitement of finding something or like seeing a connection. And I think it kind of goes back to what the question Chris asked, which was, how do you more of like deterministically build your confidence in things rather than like have it be based off a gut feel. So I think like doing intelligence analysis for anything, you have to be aware of your own set of biases and your own excitement levels, and that the fact that you are prone to errors in judgment, and just be aware of that and try to, I guess, overcome it, and just really look at what the data shows rather than what you feel is right. So that's a hard thing to do, though. Yeah. Oh God. Hey, Ben.
Yes, so what are your thoughts on threat actor naming convention, maybe specifically when communicating internally within a company versus using internal input to various external naming?
Yeah, good question. Question is about threat actor naming conventions, and whether you would internally use something from an external source, or whether you would use something to your own internal company, and why you might do that. So I would start by saying it kind of depends on, I think you should probably come up with your own internal naming convention unless you're part of a group, a sharing group or something that has pretty well-defined campaign naming conventions that you can just borrow and use. But coming up with your own allows you to, like I pointed out with the vendor slide, is when you get different vendor reports, rather than relying on what they call it, you're able to lump the things together that you see, that you have the data to support. So if you call, any of those things something internal to yourself, you can start to relate multiple things to that rather than going by maybe the different things that they call it. The other kind of caveat too is within sharing groups themselves, they may be sensitive to leakage of their campaign names. And if that's the case, or you think that's the case, you may want to rename things internally just so that you can be sure that you aren't a source of leakage for like a campaign name from another group. So, yeah.
Or when you have indicators that are generated that were once good, they're no longer good.
Mhm.
How do you do the aging out process?
Good. Yeah. So questions about indicators and aging out and how that process might work. So yeah, there are lots of indicators that are probably only good for a short period of time. Within crits, so crits allows you to tag things. We've started tagging things with like phase, colon, and then X number of days. And so what that does, we then have a script that's able to go through and take a look at anything that needs to be phased out, and then it turns those off after that specific amount of time. But that's a hard question too, because there are groups out there that will reuse the same infrastructure years later. There are groups out there that change constantly. So I guess it really probably depends on what you're seeing and how it's impacting you internally. So if you're not getting a lot of false positives, do you really need to turn it off? Probably not, but if you are, then yeah, you probably want to explore some sort of strategy to phase things out. Yes, Chris. So, no, you go ahead. Yeah.
Along the same lines with the indicator, I thought that sounded, as far as how long an indicator is good, what occurred to me is there a lifetime that you would attribute each kind of indicator? That some indicators may be a short-lived indicator, other indicators might be a longer-lived indicator.
Right. Yeah. So this question's about indicator types and how that influence how long you may keep it active or not. Yeah, I think it does have. I would have some influence. For instance, a mutex is probably something you can just keep on forever. But an IP address or a domain name, that's probably something that you'd want to phase out pretty quickly, depending on the group. So yeah, it really depends again. But yeah, there are cases where some types will be longer lived than others. Yeah.
So from a team perspective, team of one at this point, right? So what do you think it takes? What are the skill sets it takes to be successful at this if you are starting out? How should you think about building that?
Yeah. Question is, what are some of the skill sets that you probably need to build something like this? I'll speak from a team perspective. So, I mean, doing an intelligence program takes data from your entire team. So it is important to have strong detection capabilities. It's important to have management that understands why you're doing intelligence. And then when you get into the intelligence program itself, yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to like maybe automating some of the stuff, it takes, I write scripts all the time, so it takes probably some programming know-how if you're going to do that. But it takes kind of an analytical mind too, and again, the ability to kind of step out and realize that you want the data to do the work more than your own intuition. And it also takes pretty deeply technical skills too. So if we're actually reverse engineer malware and really dig down as deeply as possible, I mean that's an extremely technical skill set. So yeah, pretty broad range, I guess. Yeah. Yeah.
So, do you think you can be successful using some of the commercial or open source sandboxing technologies without having to be reverse engineering yourself?
I think you can be pretty successful, yeah, using open source sandboxing technologies. to do as much of the work for you. And then, of course, there are tons of websites out there that you can throw a sample into if you don't care about sharing it, and they'll run it through a sandbox for you. You may have to wait a little bit, but that'll help you at least get the main things out of that malware. But there are definitely cases where we've found things that just don't run in anything, and the only way to really understand what it is to dig into it and reverse engineer it. So unfortunately, most of the time I think you can get away with it fine, and actually it's great if it runs in a sandbox because that saves you so much time. But if it doesn't, yeah, then you really do. If you want to learn about it, you have to dig into it. So I think one more question.
Along the open source lines, like I'm not lucky enough to have a team to work with on this. How much do you think relying on some of the open source material out there, like the emerging threats databases and all that, as sort of a baseline to compare what you're doing against?
Right.
Makes sense. That's like,
Yeah. So I think it's when you're limited in resources, you have to take as much as you can get, right? And I think there are a lot of great open source resources that you can collect and learn from. So yeah, taking things from emerging threats or from, I mean, even if you like really dig into specific indicator feeds and things like that, I mean, I would definitely read any open source reports, malware write-ups, things like that if you have time to do so, because obviously time is limited. But I mean, you can get a lot from there. It's just sometimes hard to connect it all together. But you can do it. So we're pretty much out of time. So thank you very much. Come talk to me. I'd love to hear what other people are doing and how you're approaching a lot of this. So thank you.